Iron Maiden alive!
I do like Iron Maiden a lot. Welcome back to Grab a Stack of Rock and 50 Years of Iron Maiden. We are here tonight with our special guest, Reed Little. You've seen him on Grab a Stack of Rock before. I've worked with him on Rock Daydream Nation. He's been on the Contrarians. How are you doing tonight, Reed?
I am doing great. Thank you for inviting me. Always a treat to get to talk about one of my all-time favorite bands.
Excellent.
And
have
this
you
is
met
an album
Harrison?
that I have a very special relationship with, so we'll get into that.
Oh, good. I always like when there's a special relationship between the guest and the album. Now, have you met Harrison before? Is this your first time?
I think it's our first time.
Well, excellent.
So.
Well, it's nice to finally have you guys with me face to face. Tonight we are talking about a, shall we say, divisive album. I think that's fair. This is No Prayer for the Dying. And before we get started, I will just run down some album history. This record was recorded from June to September in 1990 at Steve's Barn. Very interesting. They recorded it with a mobile. It was released on the 1st of October, 1990, produced as always by Martin Birch. We have a quote here from Bruce Dickinson. I'm going to get a little blue here, but Bruce said it was shit. It was a shit sounding record, and I wish we hadn't done it that way. At the time, I was as guilty as anyone else in going, oh, great, look, we're all covered in straw. What a larf. Now, this is a first album.
Yes. In his book, he would amend that to be a little less harsh, and he'd say that they were sort of succumbing to like the Pope syndrome, where the Pope can't be wrong because he's the Pope, sort of thing.
Right, the infallibility.
Maiden were sort of at their peak, yes.
The infallibility principle. Continuing on, this is the first album without Adrian Smith since the debut. Adrian put out a solo album under the name Adrian Smith and Project. Get a look at that CD there. Silver and Gold was the name of the album. Steve Harris was quite enthusiastic. He thought that any success in the hard rock realm, which this was, might do Maiden some good. But as they started recording, writing, and rehearsing this album, it was clear that Adrian was not happy. Also, in 1990, Bruce Dickinson released his solo debut album, Tattooed Millionaire, an album I quite like a lot, actually. This album featured on guitar a guy by the name of Janick Gers, who you might best know from Gillan. He was also in the new wave of British heavy metal band White Spirit, among other projects. So, when Adrian inevitably left the band, it seemed like a natural fit to bring in Janick Gers. I'm going to play a quick clip from Nico McBrain in 1990 talking about the impact of Janick Gers.
Great player. We've all known the man for like 7 or 8 years, and I think Bruce has known him a little longer. So we all had a relationship, if you like, you know, friendly before, and that really obviously helps too. So you know the guy before you actually know him, if you know what I mean. And it's working out great. He's a great performer. He's a brilliant showman. And he's sort of actually responsible for bringing Nessa Murray out of his shell. In my book, the best. I don't know of any other guitar player in the world that sounds like Dave Murray. And when we had Adrian, it was like two bookends, you know. There was Bruce and Steve running around doing all kinds of stuff. And I suppose, you know, what has happened is Janick's motivated Dave in such a way that Dave is all of a sudden, there's this new resurgence of this maniac. You know, that's all I can say. There's 4 of them up there now. And somebody was saying to me the other day, well, I've noticed Bruce comes to the front more now than sort of running all over the set. I mean, he still runs around, but he's up front more to the audience. And I said, yeah, well, he's got his territory marked out where he's safe. It's over the other side of the monitors, you know, because it's the other 3. I'm glad where I am, believe me. Not so dangerous, you know.
Gotta love Nico McBrain. So that's the start of the story. Opening track was a song called Tail Gunner, written by Bruce and Steve. Reed, your thoughts on the album, just to, you know, kick it off, and Tail Gunner itself.
Okay, and if I go too long on general thoughts, let me know. But I always say, people like us, I'm going to group us here loosely together. If you are willing to talk about music as in depth as we're going to talk about it, or if you're going to watch a show where people talk super in depth about music, you're not a casual music fan. You're somebody who music impacts your life, and you bring in things from your life into your musical experience. Well, with this album, it just happens to have been the first time I got to see Iron Maiden in concert. Now, I was living in Oklahoma City. They did not play Oklahoma City. I had to drive to Dallas to see the show. And apparently, the rock critic in the Dallas Morning News, which is the big newspaper in Dallas, had said some very unkind things about Iron Maiden prior to the show. And when they came out, they were angry and they were on fire, and they absolutely tore it up. And I remember at one point, Bruce said, the next time you take a crap, keep it in a box and mail it to the guy. I don't remember the name of the critic, but also before the show, because it's about 3 hours from where I was to get down to Dallas, I was like, I hope they play this song and this song and this song and this song. Of course, they had a much smaller catalog in 1990, but even so, they played 100% of the songs that I had wanted them to play. So all of that together made it the perfect first Iron Maiden concert. Also, it had Anthrax opening on the Persistence of Time album, which is an album I like a lot. So it was a fantastic experience, and that no doubt contributed to my fondness for this album.
Awesome.
So I do like this album quite a bit, although I have some reservations, quite a few of them, and we'll get into them as we go. I often say this is an album, sometimes things are better than the sum of their parts. This is an album that is worse than the sum of its parts. For me, every Iron Maiden album has at least a couple of bad tracks on it. Maybe not bad, but less good than the other tracks. Or in the case of Quest for Fire, I just think it sucks. So if you took any 2 tracks off of this album and parachuted them into any of the previous Iron Maiden albums in place of the ropey tracks on those albums, it would have been fine. I think this album suffers from putting all of those tracks on one album. So there isn't really like a set of truly standout material on here for me. Now, that said, some of the historical complaints, like the production, they recorded with the Rolling Stones mobile unit. That was the same unit that was used to record Machine Head. I mean, it had been around for a long time.
Same producer, too.
Yes. And at the time, everybody thought the album didn't sound very good. But now I listen to it and I think it sounds very warm and analog, and it's great. I think the guitars sound great. I think the drums sound great. The bass sounds great. But for whatever reason, Bruce is singing in a completely different style, and I really do not like his voice. Now, some of it is as a result of aging, but you have to keep that in context. He was 32 when this album was recorded, so he wasn't an old man by any stretch of the imagination, but he was a man who had spent the last 10 years doing hard touring. And for whatever reason, pardon me, I keep fans on to keep it cool here in the man cave, and it just blows hair in my mouth constantly. Whatever reason, he's using a lot more raspiness, a lot more vocal fry. I don't know if that was a choice or if that's just how he was singing at the time, because there are passages in some of the songs where his voice sounds great, and then immediately after them, he'll kick into that raspier sounding voice, and I think it's really terrible. So there's a lot of peaks and valleys within the material on this album. And I understand why the fans that don't like it. I still have a very positive view of it. So I say all that up front because as we go through these songs, it's probably the negative things that are stuck in my mind a little bit more and are going to come out more. But I do want to leave people with the idea that I actually enjoy this album. Although I did notice my CD version does not have the quote on the thing. Oh, yours doesn't either. Okay.
Well, yes, Derek left it blank so that the band could choose what quote they wanted, but either somebody ran out of time, the band couldn't decide, or for whatever reason, they never got around to putting the quote on there.
Okay. I do like that it has a Derek Riggs album cover, although the perspective on this cover has always bothered me because Eddie should be coming up out of the ground, but it looks like he's vertical and he's holding this guy completely horizontally somehow. I don't get it. But still, a good Eddie photo all around. So all of that is my preamble to get to the first track, Tail Gunner. So this is where we start off immediately with, it's not bad, but I think it suffers from being probably the track on the album that is most indicative of their approach to this album, which was that they had decided to do a back to basics album, which that's always a warning sign. The only time back to basics albums really work are when the band has done something dumb. When hair bands tried to go grunge and nobody bought their albums, and then they went, oh, we're going back to basics, and they put out, hair band albums again. That's fine. When Iron Maiden had not made any mistakes. Now, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son may not have sold as well as they wanted. I think they were kind of on a decline since Live After Death. But it was not a mistake. They were progressing forward, and if they had put out another progressive album, they would have owned that space. Because the only other arguably progressive heavy metal band at the time was Queensryche, and Queensryche was about to put out Empire, which was abandoning kind of the progressive side for a more Pink Floyd style progressive. So the first song is very much reminiscent of Aces High. It's very much reminiscent of Where Eagles Dare, but it's not as good as either of those openers. And I just feel like there was potential in a song about tail gunners. Bruce was big into aviation. The band liked themes of military and warfare, but it doesn't gel. The riff is okay, but it's not spectacular. The lyrics are a little ropey. And I don't think it makes a good first impression. So that's what I think about it. I've probably already said more than enough, so I'll pass on the torch.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Reed. I also mentioned Where Eagles Dare and Aces High, and my notes here say, from amazing songs such as Where Eagles Dare and Aces High to this. And then I call up the lyric, nail that Fokker, kill that son, gonna blow your guts out with my gun, which I just find not quite as poetic as either of the two songs that I mentioned. Also, there's one line in there that bugs me. Now, on a previous episode, we did talk about Quest for Fire, and Melissa Nee defended that song. We were talking about the lyric, the controversial lyric, in a time when dinosaurs walked the earth, and her argument was it's not Steve Harris's job to teach you history. Okay, that's fine. But my line here, my equivalent line here is, the Enola Gay was my last try. Well, right. That implies that the tail gunner of the Enola Gay didn't survive. No, the Enola Gay tail gunner, George R. Caron, didn't die until 1995, a full 5 years after this song was recorded. So that's my historical note for tail gunner. If that's what that line means, the Enola Gay was my last try. No, that tail gunner survived. Musically, I really like the riff, the chugging. Really like it. I like Steve's melodic bass line, the do 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 do. Love that. I love when Steve plays melodic bass lines. My notes are the same as yours regarding Bruce's voice. I put that he doesn't sing enough. Too much kind of like growl singing. And Tail Gunner really only has like that melodic Bruce during the chorus, climb into the sky, never wonder why. But it's not a particularly insightful lyric. You know, I guess neither was rolling, turning, diving, going again. But I don't know. Climb into the sky, never wonder why. To me, it just sounds like what rhymes with sky. You know what I mean? I'm sorry, I don't like being negative about a band that I love here, but that's my feeling. I love Nico's syncopation with the riff after the chorus, the digga 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 digga. I love it. It's wonderful. Janick's solo is not as memorable as I'm used to hearing with an Adrian Smith solo, and I don't think that on this album, I don't think Janick and Dave Murray had quite meshed yet the way that they would mesh later on, like even the next album. Notably, Steve Harris said about this song that he wished he overdubbed crowd noise because he's like, oh, this album, all it needed was crowd noise to sound live. And it's like, I would have hated that. I hate fake crowd noise. Don't do it. Don't do it. But that's a Steve Harris note. Apparently he would, in retrospect, have liked to have added fake crowd noise to Tail Gunner and make it sound like it really was live. Because as Reed said, they were going back to basics. They were stripping down the keyboards. They were writing shorter songs. There's only one song in this album that's over 5 minutes long. So they were kind of going back. You frequently heard Killers being referenced. You know, oh, we're going to try to recapture that Killers or that Number of the Beast vibe when we went into the studio, you know, really well rehearsed and banged out these songs. I think we really miss Adrian on this album, as we'll get to as we go through the album. And I am not in any way knocking Janick Gers, because I am a big fan of Janick Gers, and he gets way too much negativity in the comment section sometimes. I'm a Janick Gers defender, but this is early days. They hadn't played live together as a band yet. He'd only played with Bruce on the Tattooed Millionaire tour as far as that familiarity goes. So cut the guy some slack. It's still some growth, and I think that this is a transitional album in that regard, but we'll continue down that road. Harrison, your thoughts on Tail Gunner?
Right, so I don't have a meaningful story like Reed. I just really love this album. That being said, you know, there are only 4 Iron Maiden songs that I dislike, and Tail Gunner is probably the worst of them. This song, yuck, disgusting. The bass line is annoying. The verses are so haphazard and terribly. There's no flow. The chorus is makes my skin crawl. He's like, la, 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 Tail Gunner, la, 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 Tail Gunner. There's no flow to it at all. It's up, down, up, down, up, down. The only part of this song that I think is worth anything musically is 208 to 228, where there's this cool twin guitar bit that makes you forget that you're listening to the worst Iron Maiden song.
It's a warm night here in Canada, but wow, I'm scorched. Thanks for bringing the heat, Harrison. Okay, Reed. The first single was a track called Holy Smoke. And we'll just show the artwork real quick here. It's about televangelists. What do you think about Holy Smoke?
Well, I like this track. Before we hit that, I want to say a few things about Janick, because I'm also a Janick Gers defender. And there was a string of Iron Maiden concerts where I ended up like standing right in front of Janick, like 3 concerts in a row. So I got to see the man dance around, and I know some people are like, oh, he's so annoying. He's just constantly moving and he probably doesn't play. And I'm like, one, the man plays all of the acoustic parts. If they're on stage and they've got an acoustic, it's Janick playing. Now, he is not as quirky as Adrian Smith. Adrian is a very unusual guitarist. So when he left the band, you're going, oh, well, they lost one guy with a lot of personality. I love Dave Murray, but Dave Murray does not have a real strong individual personality as a guitar player, I think. He's more of contrast with with Adrian. But he's also very contrasted with Janick. Janick is a picker. He picks everything, whereas Dave does much more legato playing. So you get a good separation between the two guys. And Janick is very, very Ritchie Blackmore, you know. So you just get a lot more of that classic rock feel, whereas Adrian Smith was much more, you know, Thin Lizzy. So it's a different approach. But Janick didn't write any of the songs with the exception of Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter, which was originally for Bruce's band. So this is a situation where he's just brought in and has to play. So all of that said, you know, I think he does a good job. In fact, again, I think all of the guitar playing sounds great. The guitars sound great. The playing's great. As long as they are sticking to the heavy metal fundamentals of riffing, guitar solos, and singing, they're usually okay. And it saddens me that Bruce is the one who lets me down more than any of the other players on this album, because I love Bruce. Now, holy smoke, you have to put it a little bit in historical context. In 1990 in the United States, televangelists were having a terrible year. There were all kinds of scandals, sex scandals, money scandals, and everybody was writing songs about how horrible televangelists were. So Holy Smoke was just, in that way, I was kind of disappointed because it's a bandwagon song. You know, they weren't the first to come out with a song about televangelists and how awful they were. But that said, I think it's actually quite a good song. It's energetic. That's something that you lose on Fear of the Dark, and I really miss it, is the amount of energy in this. Oh, Janick, sorry. Got an invader here. You get a lot of energy. You get a lot of tempo in the songs. So, and I think Bruce sells it, although somebody pointed out they hadn't had profanity on an album since the very first album. So it really sticks out. And you're like, well, that's kind of crass. Don't really think of Iron Maiden as a crass band, but, you know, they could be a little salty now and then. But having said all that, I quite enjoy the song. I don't like, again, I don't like Bruce's vocal style. It's too shouty. It's too rough. And there's not enough, like, you know, prettier, for lack of a better word, Bruce vocal on it. But other than that, I think it's a pretty good song.
Okay. Well, I'm going to come at it from an interesting point of view here. When the first single came out, I always tried to grab the Iron Maiden singles because we knew they had B-sides. So Holy Smoke came out. I grabbed it, brought it home, and was so unhappy with the new song that I actually pledged that this time I was not going to buy the new Iron Maiden album at all. I was only going to buy the singles and avoid the album because I was not happy with Holy Smoke for the reason that you stated about the vocals. But as far as the lyrics go, I'm not going to call this an unserious Iron Maiden album because that's not the case. But I think they're being very unserious here, very jokey, and not necessarily in a way that I like. Let's go to my notes here. Holy Smoke. I was harsh in my notes. I'm not going to read that part. I did say that Only the Good Die Young from Seventh Son was far better in terms of critiquing preachers. Walking on water are miracles all you can trust. Measure your coffin doesn't measure up to your lust. Here, instead, we get, I think they're strange, and before they're dead, you can have a Lincoln for their bed. But worst of all, flies around shit, bees around honey. I do like the riff. I think it's fun. I think that the music video is a lot of fun, which was recorded on location at Steve's barn. And Janick likes to say that there's a little red plastic guitar that he plays in the music video that he said before is like, that's the best guitar I ever played. It's a little toy guitar that he's playing in a swimming pool. But it gives you an idea for the kind of fun that they were trying to have on this album. Maybe unserious. I don't know. Too much growl singing. I hate the line, "This is no joke," when the song clearly is a joke. I don't know. It doesn't work for me. I'm sorry. I don't like talking negatively about this band, and this is going to be a difficult episode for me. Spoiler alert. Over to you, Harrison.
Right, now this is more like it. I love this song. Aggressive, powerful, energetic. I really like Bruce's exaggerated rasp that he has on this album. I think it brings the aggression necessary to a lot of these songs. And I personally just think it sounds great. When it comes to Judas Priest, I'm a big fan of Defenders of the Faith, and Rob brought a lot of extra rasp in on that album while maintaining his range, and I like what Bruce does here. It adds a very unique flavor to this album among the Iron Maiden discography. And to just go a big picture for a second, one of the reasons Iron Maiden are my favorite band is because there is so much stylistic variation across the albums. I know when this album released, there might have been a general sort of apprehension that this might be the way Iron Maiden is going for the future. But now that we can look back and know that that's not eventually where they went, I think this album is a really nice piece of the Iron Maiden discography for that aggressive, more hard rock style. And I really like Janick's solos as well. They had a sort of spicy freneticness to Iron Maiden that I think this album really benefits from.
Okay, I'm glad that we're getting a cross section of opinions here. The next song is a little bit more traditional Maiden, title track. Is this the first title track that falls third on an album for Iron Maiden? Maybe. No Prayer for the Dying, this one. What do you think, Reed?
So while I'm generally positive, I think it is back to a track that doesn't measure up to the sum of its parts. I think it's, Steve Harris really started treading water at this point. This is a treading water track to me. He's attempting to write Hallowed Be Thy Name again. He also attempted to write that on, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. And he keeps going back to those themes, reincarnation and, salvation in the next life. And we get that from him over and over and over again. He's still writing songs about that. So at that point, it's well-trodden ground. And, Harrison, I will agree that some songs, in fact, the very next song, I think really benefits from that raspy delivery. But in this song, we get a juxtaposition of Bruce singing very normally and then jumping up to that rasp. And every time I go, he sings, Now There's Something to Bet On. Very nice in his range. And then, you've got nothing to lose. Except he's like, just blowing out his voice. And I'm like, that's
I think that adds grit to the song, and a sort of like, that's the sort of thing you get on the live circuit when, everything doesn't have to be as polished. So I personally really like that. But I'm a weird person.
Every time it's jabbing me in the ear. So I think this song is okay. I think it could have used a little more, like almost every track in this album. I think it could have used a little more time in the cooker to really polish it, but it doesn't detract from my enjoyment of the album. And as an album experience, that's very important to me, that every track is going to lead into the next track. You're going to carry whatever feelings you had on a song into the next song. So if you come out of a song going, I didn't like that one, that's going to impact negatively on the next track. And it does not do that on this song. I like it. I don't think it's as good as some of his other self-reflective tracks, but it's still a good song.
Thanks, Reed. I think you and I are very much in line here. My notes reflect a lot of what you just said. I just also want to get caught up on the writing credits because I've neglected to do this. But Tail Gunner was Harris Dickinson. Holy Smoke was Harris Dickinson. And this one's a Harris. I wrote, finally, something that sounds like a Maiden classic. The keyboards are intact from the previous album, but the song sounds abridged and unfinished. It sounds like it should be 2 minutes longer and feels like it needs more guitar fills during the verses. It feels somewhat like a demo. Bruce is singing great for the most part until the end when it feels like he's really pushing too hard. Janick's guitar solo is nice. It's off the cuff, but I prefer Davies. I'm finding Davies a little bit more in tune with what Maiden was doing. But again, I still think this is early days for Janick, and you can't fault the guy. As you said, he didn't write the songs on the album. And Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter is actually a Dickinson solo, right? Gers played on it, but he didn't write it. So, the songs were already written. I believe, according to Steve, Adrian was in there in the studio, in the barn, for the beginning part of the album, but then departed because he just was not happy.
He does have a co-write on one song.
And he has a co-write on one song, yeah. So, obviously, Gers would have his writing input to come. But for now, it just seems that he's sort of like an energetic kick in the butt. Probably the right guy at the right time for this band for where they wanted to go. But over to Harrison for your thoughts on the title track, No Prayer for the Dying.
Well, I love this song so much. It's almost a power ballad as the guitars come in for the chorus. I think it's a lot better than Wasting Love on the next album, where they actually sort of tried to do that sort of thing. The vocal finale where Bruce is absolutely going for the moon is one of my favorite parts of this whole album.
The God give me the answer to my life.
Yes,
That part.
that bit.
Yeah. Which is the part that I was critiquing. So again, a cross section of opinions. Now, for the very first time in a while, Murray, 2 co-writes on this album. He had a co-write on the last album too, but we have Public Enema #1, a Murray Dickinson co-write. What do you think, Reed?
So this may be my favorite song on the album. Again, because I like the speed and aggression of it. I don't like that it is presented in kind of a joking manner, because it's such pointed lyrics about societal dysfunction. And, you know, the 90s were an interesting time. It was actually kind of a lull in perhaps the sort of phenomenon that we've had in the entirety of the 21st century. So by comparison, you think, yeah, you know, he sure was ranting a lot, and it got a whole lot worse since then. Everyone's opinion, of course, on the state of the world. But I think the lyrics are great. There are just these little stabs in it. Like at one point, he goes, guns and riots. And they kind of repeat the riots. And I love that little beat. I mean, it's a second and a half, but it's a great standout little part. Speaking of parts, I think Janick, I think I always call him Yannick. Maybe his name's Janick. Who knows? I think he improvises all of his solos. So, which is one reason why they sound a little unfocused. And I think Murray composes all of his solos. Can't swear to that, but that's how they sound to me. Janick is
I know on the live circuit, Dave Murray will usually improvise and play something a bit different from what's on record.
Right. But he always sounds a little bit more stately. You know, not that Janick's not melodic as well, but he is a little bit more frantic as a player. And I imagine them just, you know, cueing the red light and him just blazing through a solo and that kind of being the end of it. But yeah, I like this one. I like the lyrics. I think Bruce's raspier voice really fits this song, and it's a standout track on the album for me.
Okay. Harrison has noted on prior episodes that whenever you get a Dave Murray co-write, you usually get a pretty good song out of it. I think Public Enema #1 is a pretty good song, but I don't like, as you said, the jokey title. I think it just kind of, it doesn't do the song any favors anyway. Right. I do like Nico's little ha-ha at the start of the song. I love that. My only note here was that I wish Bruce would sing more and growl less. I wrote that the chorus is the high point, but that I felt that maybe they didn't quite join up with the verses perfectly. But that's just my perception. And that's, excuse me, that's really all I had to say about Public Enema #1. So back to Harrison.
Right, I really love this song. It's fast and aggressive as all hell. That's how I like it. There's a great twin guitar riff. Bruce's singing is absolutely venomous here. I think the chorus is actually a bit of a low point. It lets up the intensity a bit, but it's quick and like, you know, where can you go? The songs, the verses are already so intense and aggressive that you can't really take it to the next level without jumping metal styles, I think. So the chorus is quick, it's over soon, and it's back to the aggression. And yeah, definitely a standout track on the album.
Awesome. So that brings us to the end of side 1 with a track called Fate's Warning. Not the band, a song called Fate's Warning. What do you think about this one, Reed?
So this is an unusual track for me. I can't explain why, but I remember nothing about this song. I've listened to this album, I don't know, 100 times, 150 times. And as soon as this song is over, my brain erases it from existence. It is just, it's gray sound to me. It doesn't have any standout parts. So I actually have no commentary for it. Every time I look at the album listing, I'm like, oh yeah, Fate's Warning. I wonder what that song's like. I don't know why. Because there are so many other things that stick with me on this album, but for some reason, this song just doesn't. So, don't know what to say beyond that.
Here comes the contrast. I think this is the best song in the album.
All
It's
right
my
then.
favorite song in the album. I think it's the most immediate song in the album. And I remember when I was a young guy hanging out with my buddies that had this album, they found it memorable as well. Because I remember being in, wish I could remember the guy's name, but he lived in Guelph, Ontario. And Bob Shipper and I were hanging out with him in his basement. And I can remember us breaking into song, "Be it the devil or be it him, you can count on just one thing." And it was just, it's one of those Maiden choruses that I think is more anthemic, that kind of reminded me of some of the great Maiden choruses of old. This is a Murray Harris co-write. I just liked everything about it. The verses, the choruses. I think this song could have been on Seventh Son of a Seventh Son if it had been produced with that kind of production style. I would call it a deep cut. I would say this is a song that well, Harrison will tell us if it's ever been played live, but I don't think it has. It should have been. I really like Fate's Warning, and it's one of those forgotten songs. And maybe Reed is on the button. Maybe he's accurate about why it's a forgotten song. But for me, the opposite. So Harrison, I guess you're the tiebreaker.
Well, I love it. Epic riff, epic chorus. That volcano exploding bridge kind of does, as in the lyrics, volcano exploding, blah, 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 kind of does park the momentum a little bit, but it's also quick and it's back to the epic soon. One of my favorite parts of this song is that bit like after the solo and before the chorus, the last chorus finale, there's this bit where they sort of strip back some of the instrumentation to let the riff just go. Sort of like Rainbow in the Dark does it as well. And I'm a huge sucker for bits like that, where right before the final finale, you just get the riff with a bit of the other stuff taken away, and I love that part of this song.
I know the exact part you mean. Yep. Boom. Yep.
That bit.
I know the part you mean. Okay, so I guess in all fairness, Harrison has broken the tie, but that's okay. We're moving on to side two.
Yeah, but can we really trust Harrison?
No, absolutely not. That's one thing we've learned through this series. But regardless, I think it's a good side closer. But now we're on to a Harris solo write called "The Assassin."
Okay. I have such mixed feelings about this song. There are things that I love about this song. I love the buildup of it. I love the cinematicness of it. And there's a lot of songs on side two here that we could kind of talk about in this way. But for me, Iron Maiden is best when they are under 7 minutes. So that is a big selling point of this album. There are no epic length tracks. Like you said, only one song is even over 5 minutes. And it's because I think they are not particularly interesting when they are doing extended instrumental passages. They just don't compose those very well. They're the same thing, simply done for like a minute and a half, as opposed to having like a mini song, which is how a better progressive track would do it. They fill up time. So this is a song that if it had come out on Fear of the Dark, if it had come out on A Brave New World, X Factor. You know what? I've listened to X Factor exactly one time in my life. I bought that album when it came out. I didn't know Bruce had left the band. I bought it, took it home, put it in the player, took it out, threw it away, and have never listened to it again. So I don't know, and that was at the time. So I don't know if I would have mellowed on it over the last 30 plus years or not. But I've given it no time at all. But so I like the fact that this song is not just too long. I like most of the lyrics as Bruce is setting up the guy tracking his target. I think all of that is actually quite good. And then it throws away all of my goodwill on the chorus, which I think they sound like AC/DC doing Dirty Deeds. Done dirt cheap. The back, better watch out, is terrible. That's a terrible moment. I hate it. And Bruce going over the top, 'cause I'm the assassin. I actually like, but it's silly as hell. And the rest of this song is so serious that all of a sudden there's this break and it is just awful for the chorus. And then they go back into the song and it's serious again. And I'm like, who sequenced this? They should have thought about this more, because that doesn't work for me. Or at the end where Bruce says, and you can kiss your ass goodbye. I'm like, could you have wrapped it up in a way that had a little more gravitas? I don't know. So I love 2/3 of this song, and I hate about 1/3 of it. So there you go.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Your take, not necessarily the song. That was a great take. I agree with everything you said. I wrote down that I had issues with the better watch out. Better watch out. I had issues with that. It just doesn't hook me. I wrote that the bass is very clanky in the intro, but that the riff is sharp. And you can really hear the difference in the guitars between Davey and Janick, or Janick. I've heard Nico call him Janick. I don't know. I'm going to call him Janick. Works for me. I wrote that it's a good song, though the chorus isn't quite there. It sounds like it could use something else instead of what's there. Otherwise, pretty close to classic Maiden. I liked Janick's solo, but Davey's solo seemed more in tune with the song in this instance. And I agree with what you said about how Davey's are a little bit more composed and Janick's are a little bit more off the cuff. And one of the great things about Iron Maiden today is that they have a wonderful mixture between Adrian's very thoughtful compositions, Davey's very, what did you use? Regal, I think you used the word. And Janick's style, which is very, Bruce described it as like a machine gun, short and choppy, which is very much, you said that he picks every note. That's that machine gun effect. So the Assassin, 2/3. I'll give it 2/3, Reed. We're in line. Let's see if Harrison disagrees this time on the Assassin.
I'm similar. Like, it's not my favorite song by them. I did have issue with the chorus, but I will admit that the live version grew on me a lot. So that version I prefer a lot more.
Yeah, there's something about just the way that better watch out is done.
Yes, the chorus translated a lot better live.
Yeah.
Even the Bruce part as well.
Right. It's the same compositional style that he would use on like Nomad from Brave New World, right? This is, again, because this is the era of Steve Harris's greatest hits.
Sure.
Starting here, Steve becomes less and less willing to step outside of his own comfort zone, which is why he needs players like Adrian Smith and Bruce in the band who are going to push him.
Sure. So one last note on the Assassin before we move on. On the next album, we have a track about the fugitive. Maybe the Assassin is after the fugitive. Let your minds wander on that thought. But let's move on to the next track. This is Run Silent, Run Deep, a Harris Dickinson composition. Reed, this is a World War II song. What do you think?
World War I, I think. Perhaps
So
it's World War
subs,
II.
is it not?
Yes,
It's U-boats. It's U-boats.
But there were U-boats in World War I.
Okay. Well, it's a
The
U-boat
sinking of
song.
the Lusitania and all of that. They were sunk by a U-boat. But
Okay.
I think that I really like this song. This is possibly my favorite of the more traditional Iron Maiden-y songs. I think German U-boats is perfect source material for Bruce to write lyrics. I like the feeling of it. I think it's the song for me where his new vocal style melds best, where he's got some more traditional sounding, like higher but not as growly vocals, especially when he's doing the chorus running silent, running deep. I like the feeling of the song, and I like on any other album, they would have put 2 or 3 minutes of unnecessary instrumental repetition on it. And I love the fact that this is, even though it's the longest track on the album, it still feels very well composed. It's got a beginning, a middle, and an end. It flows. There's no part of it that I'm like, can we just get to the next part? So I like it. I think it's the most traditional Maiden-esque song. And for me, if you're going to pick a throwback song, a back to basics song, this is the one that I think goes back to basics most successfully.
I would agree. But for the record, Mother Russia is longer.
Yeah,
Is
so I
Mother
was just
Russia's one.
checking,
Yeah, it's over 5. That's the one that's over 5 minutes. But this is, I
Oh,
think,
okay.
the second longest. Agreed with everything you said. It's got a classic Maiden feel, and I love the chug. The I love that. It's so good. It's so effective. Nico is throwing in some incredible fills that just match the feel of the song. Doing some great stuff here. Wonderful lyrics by Bruce. As you said, the U-boats, they were death traps. Of course, this is great lyrical material for him to mine. And you know that Bruce has probably read 100 books on these things. He's not just well read in terms of aviation, but history in general. I love Run Silent, Run Deep. Wonderful solo work by both guys, including the dual harmonies. I love it. They're so good. This, to me, is Maiden hitting all of its strides on Run Silent, Run Deep on this album. I think that, as you said, they maybe had a tendency later on to do a song like this and add a couple more minutes of instrumental repetition. And we mentioned that in the prior episode, and we'll talk more about that as we go forward. But I think you're right. For me, top marks on Run Silent, Run Deep. Over to you, Harrison.
Yeah, I love the song. We're back to great epic form, a la Fate's Warning. There's a great atmosphere. It tells a really vivid story, and Bruce's voice soars on the chorus.
Yeah. Brevity is sometimes a virtue. Well said, Harrison. Now we get into perhaps a controversial song. The only Adrian Smith co-write on it, which unsurprisingly was with Bruce. And it's kind of a different song for the album. It's called Hooks in You. What do you think about this one, Reed?
So this is the other track that I am most of two minds about. I think I'd like the instrumental of the song a lot, although it is really, really reminiscent of the Michael Schenker group Armed and Ready. Listen to those two songs back to back. It is so similar. Just in the guitar riff. So I like the music. Yes, it's a little bit more hard rock than heavy metal, but some of my favorite Adrian Smith compositions are the ones that are a little more hard rock, like Wasted Years from Somewhere in Time. He had a real talent for that type of material. I think he's got a real talent for writing riffs that go well with a more melodic kind of song structure. And up to this point, I am 100% on board. I think albums benefit from having a track that's not the same stylistically. It makes it a little more interesting. But then I hate Bruce's lyrics. I absolutely despise them. I understand what he's going for. Adrian says they were based on a real experience where he was trying to buy property, and one of them had been like a swinger's house, and they had hooks set up in the ceiling so that they could put swinging chairs. Look it up. But I hate it. Come up with any other freaking lyric. I hate the lyric. I just hate it. I can't get past it. If he had put 2 seconds of thought into anything else, he could have come up with a lot of themes. And then to come up afterwards and they go, oh, well, it's the third chapter in the Charlotte the Harlot saga. I'm like, I've got the keys to view in number 22. That's the only thing that connects. 22 Acacia Avenue, which is a song I love. I love 22 Acacia Avenue. Not so much Charlotte the Harlot, but I love 22 Acacia Avenue. But this song, like the music, hate the lyrics.
Yeah, you pretty much anticipated everything I was going to say. I put that I think it's total filler. I called it the worst song of the Charlotte quadrilogy, if we're going to call it that, I guess. Kinky lyrics, which is rare territory for Iron Maiden, and perhaps by this point of the band's history, not necessary. To me, that's more of like a Di'Anno and early era kind of subject matter for Iron Maiden. Doesn't fit on this album. The Adrian riff itself is cool because it's something with his personality in it, which this album needed. But otherwise, you can hear, I think, that Adrian didn't have much left in the gas tank to bring to Iron Maiden at this point in the game. He'd laid his cards on the table with the Silver and Gold album. He was not in this headspace anymore, and that's all he had. I think it's clear. Not a song I particularly care for as well, and I guess I kind of like the one part where it's hooks in you. I kind of like that part, and the guitar part that goes on there. I like it. But I think when I heard the album, I was actually shocked that this song wasn't of better quality because I expected more from a Bruce Adrian co-write. Harrison, your thoughts?
I don't mind this song. It's a little lackluster, but it's also a little catchy. It's a harmless tune. Definitely of a lesser song on this album. But if we're talking about the early era, I just want to briefly go back to Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, where we talked about a couple of B-sides that were remakes of first album tracks. And I talked about how I really didn't think that the Seventh Son sound was right for those songs. I think that those songs would have benefited a lot better from the sound and the vocal style that Bruce has on this album. And I think Prowler 90 and Charlotte the Harlot 90, that never came to be, I think would have sounded a lot better than Prowler 88 and Charlotte 88.
Fascinating. You're right, I think. But fascinating observation. Okay, so I'm going to show you something cool here. The big single from this album went to #1 in the UK and Finland, Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter, which was written for The Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5, The Dream Child. He recorded it with Janick. I read a story about how they got together in Bruce's living room and kind of banged it out on a boom box. Steve Harris heard the song and he said, don't put it on your solo album. Keep it for Maiden. So Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter, released Christmas of 1990, went to #1. Unlikely, but it happened. What do you think?
Oh, I love this song. I guess the reason I write in a co-writing credit for Janick is I know Bruce has said he had actually composed it in a different style. And when he played it for Janick, Janick said, no, it wants to be more like AC/DC. And he is the one who gave it that AC/DC feel.
Well, the Bruce solo recording is even very different from the Iron Maiden re-recording that they did as well.
Yes. And in fact, if you ever do a thing on Bruce's solo catalog, I like Bruce as a solo performer better than Maiden, frankly. Got tickets to see him in August. I am super happy he did a national tour for the Mandrake Project. Really looking forward to that. But yeah, I love this song. I love the AC/DC kind of feel to it. Bruce is a big fan of, as we say, genre cinema. I think it fits well into the Nightmare on Elm Street kind of scenario. Bruce's interpretation of the themes of those shows is a little bit off. You can go look up old interviews with Bruce to see what he thought those old horror movies were kind of about. But Bruce was really, you can tell the headspace that he was in when he did Tattooed Millionaire, because it was much more of like a raw sexual. He'll even say, some of the songs are just open misogyny. And like he's got the lyric in there, bite the pillow, make no sound. Well, there's a reason the girl is biting the pillow, right? So it's an unusually sexual song for Iron Maiden, but I think as such it's much more successful than Hooks in You, and I like everything about it. I'm shocked it went to #1 in England, but it's a great song, and I think it was a good choice for single.
Not only #1 in England, but #1 in England at Christmas time. In fact, this single has autographs and messages etched on the B side, and I'm just going to read you these entertaining Christmas messages from Iron Maiden. So we have from Bruce Dickinson, remember, light a nice log for Santa, happy everything. From Steve Harris, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. From Nico, have a kin great ode, Happy New What's It, ta. From Dave Murray, Happy New Beer, and from Janick, best wishes. So there you have it. I don't really have a lot to add. I think Reed really nailed it. In my notes, I said that I don't think this sound is necessarily suited to Iron Maiden. I thought it was better suited to Bruce as a solo artist, but what the heck? What do I know? I don't know. Steve wanted it for the band. Um, I said that it's dumb and it rocks, but it's got a great Janick Gers guitar solo. Absolutely fantastic. One of his best solos on the album. Over to you, Harrison, on Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter.
Yeah, I love it. Lots of atmosphere, a catchy hook. My favorite part, however, is in the bridge where it's building intensity. You got these really cool guitar fills going on in the background. And then they double up. The second lot of guitars come in and it becomes twin guitar fill. I just love that bit.
Awesome. Okay. Well, this album closed on a song that perhaps hasn't aged well, but it's the Harris solo right and 5 minute and a half, roughly, Mother Russia. Okay, let's talk about Mother Russia. Go ahead, Reed.
I think kind of in the tradition of Maiden last tracks. Clearly, they were thinking of something epic. And again, you have to put it in historical context. 1990 was pretty shortly after the fall of the Berlin Wall. We're talking about the dissolution of the Soviet Union. And there was a lot of optimism that Russia would not go the way that Russia has gone. So in that way, I can respect that they put out this track saying, you know, Russia, it's got this really long, beautiful, I don't know if there's anything beautiful about the history of Russia, unless you find tragedy beautiful. It's got pretty terrible history as far back as history goes. But I think it's a decent track. I know it gets a little stick for sounding a little, you know, like the guys doing, I don't even know what the dance is called, but the guys in the big hats doing the Cossack dance. It's got that kind of feel to it, and that's a little artificial, but I don't mind it. I don't love it, but I'm okay with it, and there are parts in it that I really like. And I know it's a funny thing. I remember once on a different show talking about or listening to people talk about Somewhere in Time, and somebody was taking issue with Alexander the Great, which is a song I love, and pointing out that, well, you know, the lyrics are so artificial, and he lays out like these timelines and events, and they're not even trying to make them kind of lyrical and I'm like, yeah, but you know what? I like that. You know, Alexander the Great is the reason why I know that in 334 BC, he utterly beat the armies of Persia. I mean, so sometimes you can have these more straightforward lyrics and it works. But that said, I don't think that it's an amazing song, but I don't hate it.
You know, it's funny you should say that because I think it was in one of the episodes. It might have been the one that we did with Bicycle Legs on... I can't remember. Anyway, my point is, I did say at one point that Steve Harris, I think at one point in his life, realized there are kids out there that are learning history from Iron Maiden lyrics, because what you just said about 334 BC is 100% correct for my life too. And I think at some point in his life, Steve Harris was conscious of that fact. But I'll leave you with that. I'm going to contradict myself here, because in my notes, I put that Mother Russia, maybe it has aged well. Because the final line of the song says, "Can you be happy now your people are free?" Perhaps the answer to that was no. I love aspects of this song. I think Steve's bass melody, the do 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 do, is really good. I think it's foreshadowing of some of the stuff that they would do in the future, especially on the X Factor. I think Nico's drum beat on this is very interesting. I think his beat to that is very interesting and maybe even Clive-like. But I get what you mean, what you were saying about that riff. You know, when they were doing Power Slave and kind of going into a sort of an Egyptian vibe, I think they nailed that without being cliche. I think they nailed that vibe on Power Slave better than they nailed that generic Russian vibe on Mother Russia with you know, you can almost you can almost do that, and I don't think it's as effective, but good on them for trying. As you said, it was an historic period. We had the Scorpions obviously documenting it at roughly the same time with Winds of Change. It was an interesting time to be alive because it certainly felt different than the present day. But again, maybe that last line is prophetic. Harrison, your thoughts on this album closer, Mother Russia?
Right, I love this song. It's my favorite song on the album. It's probably my favorite Iron Maiden deep cut, outdated lyrical content notwithstanding. A hell of a riff to headbang to. One of my favorite Iron Maiden riffs. And it's not like, Public Enemy #1, where you just have to shake your head back and forth really quickly. You can get a real good in and out headbang along to this one. I love the part. I love all the parts, but I really like how the solo sort of winds down from its up tempo bit and sort of like melds itself back into the riff. Yes, this song is Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, the song Light, but there's a time and a place for everything. Sometimes I want to listen to Today Is Born, the seventh one, and then 4 minutes of really cool soloing, and sometimes I just want to quick in and out, 5 minutes, bang your head all the way through.
Brilliant, well said, and a good song to go out on. I think a good closing song. All right, so with this album, we had 3 singles and 4 B-sides, all of which are covers. We'll run through these real quickly. Reed, you can pipe in if you feel like it, if you feel like you have something to say. But starting with the Holy Smoke single, we have All in Your Mind, a cover of a band called Stray. It was written by Del Bromham. I wrote, wow, what a B-side, killer drums by Nico in the opening. It's almost like a drum solo for Nico. It's a fantastic drum intro. I love how he ends it with that pop, 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 pop. I do not know Stray, but I've always felt this B-side was far better than the A-side, Holy Smoke. Your thoughts, Harrison?
All in Your Mind, yeah, that's not too bad. I enjoyed it. And similarly, Kill Me Ce Soir, another one that isn't too bad and I enjoyed. I'm a Mover doesn't really do it for me. And I'll let you give your thoughts on those.
Okay. Well, Kill Me Ce Soir, Golden Earring, written by George Kooymans, John Fenton, and Barry Hay. Interesting tune. It makes use of the keyboards quite well. Bruce speaks some French, so it's kind of cool to hear him singing in French. It's not a song I really care for a lot, but I thought they did a decent version of it. I thought that I got good dollar value with my CD single when I bought it. I'm a Mover is the one that you mentioned. That was the B-side to Bring Your Daughter. Free cover, Andy Fraser and Paul Rogers. I don't know. I wrote that I'm indifferent. I'm not a Free fan. I don't listen to a lot of blues rock, but it sounds really nice and dry and live and has a great groove by Nico McBrain. He's not playing how you normally expect Nico McBrain to play. Jury's out. I don't know how I feel about that one. And then the last one's the Zeppelin cover, Communication Breakdown, written by Page, Bonham, and Jones. I wrote that it's frantic and fast, but not necessarily a great Zeppelin cover. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I love it, but it was the only B-side I was familiar with previously, so there is that familiarity that might affect that. It does feel a little tongue-in-cheek, but it's musically solid. I love how Iron Maiden have a Led Zeppelin cover that's just a B-side. It's basically just forgotten about sitting on the B-side. Any other band, they have a Zeppelin cover, they play that live, they put it on the greatest hits, but Maiden, it's like, oh yeah, we covered Led Zeppelin, what of it?
Right, and of course, Dave Murray is a enormous Free fan, so it makes sense that they would cover a Free song. And I don't have much to add. I haven't listened to those B-sides in probably 30 years, and don't remember them. I was telling Mike, I vaguely remember not liking Kill Me Ce Soir, but that's as close as I can get to any memory of those tracks at all. So.
For my money, of the tracks, All in Your Mind is the keeper. And man, Nico just kicks ass on that track. Guys, check it out. Check out All in Your Mind. Nico's just a mind blower on that one. All right. So at this point of the show, before we sum up the album and take a quick look at the cover art, we're going to get Harrison to take us somewhere back in time to 1990 and the No Prayer on the Road tour. Was that what they called it this time?
No Prayer on the Road. 1990. To 1991, 106 dates across Europe, North America, and Japan. This This tour was notable as they sort of stripped back in the studio. They also stripped back the stage set live. Gone were those massive towers and spires of ice. It was basically just amps and the band on stage. But with this came a renewed set of energy from the band. You know, there was a lot more focus on the playing and the actual stage presence of the band. And Bruce's voice had recovered from that nadir point of the previous tour, and he was sounding really strong again. Perhaps quite a bit thinner than he had previously, his voice, but certainly strong, and he had the range back. Now, the set list, unlike other Iron Maiden set lists, this one was pretty consistent all the way through. They played 6 songs from No Prayer for the Dying on the regular. The title track, Public Enema #1, Tail Gunner, Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter, and Holy Smoke. And The Assassin and Hooks in You were played about 50% of the time as well. The Evil That Men Do and The Prisoner were notable for being played on the same 4 dates each, but other than that, it was a pretty standard rest of the band's hits in there. Nothing, The Number of the Beast 3, nothing too adventurous. Going forward, however, No Prayer for the Dying basically dropped completely off the set list. Into the Fear of the Dark and the Real Live tour, you got Tail Gunner and Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter, but after that, they were both dropped as well. And the only time anything from No Prayer for the Dying has been performed. And I say this as we are recording in mid-April. By the time this airs, the Run for Your Life tour may have started, and this may not be correct. But so far, the only time they've ever done anything from No Prayer for the Dying live is after the Blaze Bayley era. They didn't do it in the Blaze era, but in the reunion era was 2003, where Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter got played. Now, Mike, I believe you want to take a look at the cover art now, because this is an interesting one.
This is an interesting one, and Reed mentioned earlier, there's his copy doesn't have an inscription. Well, there are 2 album covers for this. We're going to look at both. There we go. So Harrison's got the 1998 remaster. Derek Riggs redid 2 album covers for this series of reissues. And
do we have confirmation that it's Derek Riggs, or is it just a really good copy?
I thought it was Derek, but we may be wrong on that.
Yeah, this is going to get into something that I don't like about the redone artwork, and that's that Eddie has red eyes, and the classic Derek Riggs Eddie does not have red eyes. It's one of the things that makes him unique and sets him apart from all the quintessential demons around, is that traditional Derek Riggs Eddie has lightning bolt eyes, not red eyes. Red eyes are cliche, and on the redone artwork, they gave him red eyes, and I hate that. The other thing that's off about the redone artwork, I prefer the original artwork. So you see how Eddie's all lit up and yellowy here? Well, the reason he's lit up and yellowy is because on the original art, the groundskeeper has a lantern, and that lantern is lighting Eddie up. But they removed the groundskeeper on this piece of artwork, and yet they kept this phantom lighting that's lighting him up here, even though there's nothing in the picture to light him up like this.
Correct. Right. Reed mentioned earlier that it feels like the album should be facing this way, and in fact, Christmas of 1990, I recall seeing ads in the local flyers for the local record stores where they printed the cover this way. I feel like Derek Riggs was rushed on this cover. That's just how I feel. I mean, there's no inscription on the tomb, and if you look at the fragments of the lid there, they don't fit. I think that's something. If Derek had time, he would have made sure that those fragments fit, and they don't. Right. Also, this is the second time. Sorry, go ahead, Reed.
I was going to say, even if you change the orientation so that Eddie's coming out of the ground, now it looks like his coffin is tilted like this. The perspective on this drawing is all jacked up. I like the drawing, but the perspective on it is just wrong, and it bothers me.
I do not like the drawing, and if you look at the groundskeeper's neck, he looks like he's got a big goiter like George Lucas. That might have been uncalled for. The last thing I don't like, and Harrison and I have discussed maybe a perceived continuity from all the album covers up to this point. Now we have him being reborn again. This is the second time. Live After Death was the first time. So he's being reborn again. Recycled gimmick. He doesn't have the bolt in his head, but it's a recycled gimmick, and I'm sorry, I don't care for it. And I was not surprised when Derek Riggs ended up not doing the next album cover, but we'll get there when we get there. That's really all I had to say about it. I agree with Harrison. I don't like the red eyes of the reissue. Anything else we want to say about the artwork? I thought the singles were better. Tail Gunner, Holy Smoke, I thought they were better. No further thoughts on the artwork?
No, not really.
Okay, so let's sum up. Before we give our rankings on this album, I want to tell you what Nico McBrain said about this album. So here's the last clip with Nico McBrain. Hear what he says about what he thinks about No Prayer for the Dying.
We've got, right, let's have a word with Martin, got the mobile down. The rest is history. It's committed. And we knew it was going to work. Martin said, without doubt, as long as everybody was happy doing it that way, whereas, you know, when the guitars were done, they used to sit in the control room, the speakers and stuff were in the studio, and well, sitting in the mobile is very small. So everyone was like, from that point of view, from the guitars, were very happy. Adrian, that was when it started. He said, I don't know whether I want to do this, and things settled in, and the rest, as we know, with that's well documented, but, you know, he wasn't happy with it, and we were. And I think it's the best album yet.
The best album yet. A sentiment that he repeated in 1998, according to Harrison.
Yes, I nicknamed him Nico. This is the best album we've ever done, McBrain, after I watched a 1998 interview, and he's like, this is the best album we've ever done.
So that's one perception.
I think bands are contractually obligated to say that about every new album. I mean, what are you going to do? Although, there's kind of a funny story. I was at Prague Power in Atlanta several years ago, probably 2011, 2012. And the band Royal Hunt was there. And I was talking to the lead singer of Royal Hunt, and they had just come out with an album. And I asked him, so where would you rank this in your, I don't own any of your albums, but I'm going to buy some. So is the new one the best? And he looks at me and says, we're not supposed to say this, but no, you want to get these other albums that we did. You know, get albums like 3 and 4. Those were the good ones. And I was like, oh, okay. So that was honest. The best album we've ever done, contractual obligation.
There you go. Now, as far as rating this album myself, personally, I'm a bit torn. You know, somewhere down the line, if you are rating the albums, if you're putting them in order, if you're ranking them, inevitably one of them has to be last. And I'm not sure where I stand on that yet because Harrison and I haven't finished the series yet. So I'm going to regretfully say that I'm, up until this point of the series, this is my least favorite Iron Maiden album. I'm going to go 3 out of 5 stars. And this is the point of the series where I'm very proud of this episode. I think we've done a wonderful episode here, but it's not as glowing as previous ones. And I hope we don't lose viewers at this point because we're not as glowing as we were. But every band, Harrison was for the most part.
But yes, I like Iron Maiden. You know, I don't just like Iron Maiden. I love Iron Maiden. And yes.
But every band does hit a rough patch. It's inevitable. And for me, this is the rough patch. Don't worry, folks. I have plenty more praise coming as we go forwards in this series. But I wasn't happy in 1990 when No Prayer came out. And as I immersed myself in it this week, I'm still on rocky ground with the album. 3 out of 5 stars is my rating. What do you think, guys?
Go ahead, Harrison.
Well, right. All right. So for me, this album's either a 4.25 out of 5 or a 4.5 out of 5. Basically, it flips depending on how good I feel Hooks in You and The Assassin does for me on any given day. On a good day, it's a 4.5 out of 5.
Okay, Reed, you're up.
So again, as I said, one of the very first things I said about this album, I really feel 2 ways about this. If I'm trying to be sober and rational and looking at it, what I think of the qualities of each song, what I think of the performances, what I think of just the overall songwriting and Bruce's lyrics, I normally think out of 10 rather than out of 5, but it's the same as yours. I go 6 out of 10 or 3 out of 5. But in my heart, this album was so important to me. The experience of going to see them in concert, and this album became such a big part of my life. It gets an 8 out of 10. But that said, it is definitely not in my upper echelon of favorite Maiden albums. But I'm always happy to play it. It's got some material on it I absolutely love. And, you know, I was going to say if I made a playlist, I never make playlists. I'm an album guy. I play albums. But if I were going to make a playlist, there are several tracks on here, like Running Silent, Running Deep, that would be in my playlist. So, again, two brains about that.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Reed Little, for joining us for this special retrospective on No Prayer for the Dying. I hope that the viewers don't throw tomatoes at their screens, but please like and subscribe because we have a lot more Iron Maiden to come, including the next studio album, on which there are more changes afoot. So maybe we'll feel differently next time. You'll just have to tune in to Grab a Stack of Rock and 50 Years of Iron Maiden to find out. Reed, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks
Rock
for the
and roll.
invitation. Up the irons.
Cheers. Up the irons. Bye, everybody.